what could be his or her role in helping the Gen Z? As how can, let's say, if I have to groom a young person, right? What support or how can I steer to build the story building skill? That's number one. And number two, just going back to the comment that you made earlier, in your experience, what tends to be more powerful, I guess, if there is a way to think about that, is that your personal stories versus, let's say, someone else's story. So, for example, like my son read the book of Michael Phelps, and he tells about the amount of discipline this guy had, 6 hours for 7 days for 5 years, and it's someone else's story, but equally powerful. And he says on YouTube that this was my darkest days, but I climbed the highest mountain and so on. So two questions. One is, how can a boss help a Gen Z? And number two, what works better, more of yours versus others? You can take it in any sequence.
So I think the first is for a boss, is to get people to be aware of that power. Right? That's the first thing. Can I tell people? Because as a boss, I tell people, no, if you do this, is better for us or for you. So can I actually tell people that it's a great thing? Yeah, it is very powerful. Maybe draw examples. The boss along with his team goes for a town hall, and one leader just gives some data and whatever assertions. Another leader tells a story. That evening, I could sit with if I'm the manager, sit with the team, say, which one do you remember? And then I say, that story. See? So I point out great examples, and I give you and of course, the freedom to do that when you're in a meeting with me. The second is what Mahatma Gandhi had said: be the change you want to see in everyone else. Yeah. I cannot be telling you how stories are powerful and you should use stories if I'm not a storyteller myself. Yeah. And given that storytelling still has a bad name, which is kahani mat batao, etc. I need to be able to see my boss doing storytelling for me to have the courage to do it myself.
Yeah.
So the boss has to walk the talk and be the change. Yeah. So those are the two things I would say. First is bring the awareness and give the permission.
Yeah.
Two is look at showing them great examples in their everyday work.
Yeah.
And three is demonstrate the fact that, be the change.
Right.
As far as the second question, I don't honestly have a necessary preference that A story could be better than B story. There are sometimes I don't have as powerful a story from my life, but I have the other story, which is more powerful.
Yeah.
Then it would just be which one drives home a point better.
Got it.
I typically say that, it's easier to look at your own stories because you know all the details.
Yeah.
You will be authentic in saying it. Yeah.
Would you encourage that we build more of our own? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's either or.
Sure.
Yeah. But whenever I don't have a great story and there is a great story from somewhere else, I would use that.
Yeah.
Remember that any kind of communication, the source credibility is extremely important.
Yeah.
Right? So if I don't have a story of my own, I shouldn't use a story where that source credibility is not so high. Yeah, because it will not be memorable. So, for example, let me take the example that you gave of your son. If your son were to give a speech and mention about Michael Phelps' discipline, yeah, that would have a far higher impact than if he said, I had a neighbor who studied very hard and he passed his exams. Yeah. In a sense, I mean, I could say he studied 8 hours a day, even when he was unwell. But it is not going to. Why? Because the source is Michael Phelps, right? That is it just basically in any story, the higher the stakes, the higher the impact of the story.
Right.
The stakes for an Olympic champion is higher than my neighbor. Yeah. But when it is my story, A, because we love empathizing with fellow human beings, and B, because it is my story, I'll have all the data. It's as powerful, but I would use both. I won't have a preference for one or the other.